Exactly, that's why. Okay, good evening. It's again this time of the year, the interactive plenary panel. I do not believe Greece is in recession. Look at the wealth here. Give them a big hand. Ladies and gentlemen, we are extremely happy to welcome you to this panel. I am especially. I don't know why I'm that lucky, but anyway, I am. And here we are. Let me tell you the rules of the game. I have some questions that were sent by colleagues, and we'll start with these questions. But there will be questions from the floor. You will each answer the same question. And yes, I'm sorry, Steve, but sometimes you'll have to be the first one. We kind of rotate.
Much better.
Okay. And I'd like to welcome you as Maria Macra, the chair, did. And here we are. First question. I decided it is best that you have the question. I'll read it out. Luke, you'll be the first one to answer. So the first question is, given that for most teachers, the coursebook is a tool of primary importance, to what extent has technology affected its content, structure, and underlying teaching method? This was a question asked by Anza Lacchiotti. I don't know whether Anza is here, but that's a question asked by Anza Lacchiotti. Luke?
Thank you. Okay, after 15 seconds of reflection, I guess one question I have is, what technology are we talking about? I'm guessing we may be talking about the latest technology and digital technology, and I'll answer on that basis. And again, my first thoughts are that new technology hasn't affected the content and structure and underlying teaching method of course books very much, if at all. I mean, this is something I've wrestled with as a writer.
Look, sorry.
I could just talk much louder. This question of whether technology has influenced the design and structure and content of course books, I feel like a tenor at the opera. This question... I've got the microphone now. Now I can talk very quietly. Is one I've wrestled with as a writer. And I think one of the key issues here is linearity, because a book is by definition linear. We read from left to right, and there is pagination. And it's very difficult to conceive of a paper course book which doesn't have built-in linearity. It has a sort of implicit linearity, however much you try and change it. And I think the most interesting potential of new technology in this area, and we see it exemplified in certain imaginative apps for smart devices, is non-linearity, is the idea that one can use scrolling menus and sort of randomized interfaces within a screen to suggest content, to allow you to customize content. I think these are things which are very interesting. They're certainly interesting to me as an educator who believes in spontaneity and a responsive pedagogy. But I think they're very difficult to build into paper course books. So in a sense, the challenge for digital developers is to find a way of making new course books non-linear. But of course, the linearity is also built into the syllabus. It's built into the curriculum, and very often the national curriculum. So there are really big challenges here.
Thank you. David? We're
Well,
here.
Me?
Yes, you.
There's no other David on this panel? No.
No.
Has to be me.
Well,
Well, that's really annoying because I don't know the first thing about course books. You know, I'm not an English language teacher. I'm just a linguist here. I have the easy job. You have the difficult job. All I've got to do is just try and analyze the language. Heaven help me if I ever had to try to teach it to anybody. That would be a disaster. But, so the thing that intrigues me about this question, of course, is the extent to which the new technology is affecting the English language or the Greek language or whichever language you happen to be teaching. And of course the answer is, in some respects, not very much, and in other respects it is. In vocabulary, for example, there's been very little change in English, say, over the last 20 years. Couple of thousand new words come into English as a result of the technology, but that's a drop in the ocean as far as vocabulary is concerned. No new grammatical constructions of any significance, really, that have come in. In orthography, that's where the main change is, isn't it, really? Punctuation, capitalization, spelling. That's where I think the biggest problem is going to be, because as you were saying this morning, Agnes, you know, the change in mindset that there has been. For us, books are central and the screen is marginal. For these kids, the screen is central and books are marginal. And when you actually start to analyze the way in which the youngsters are, without anybody teaching them to do it, altering the rules of the language, then it starts to get interesting. And how the course book handles this, I have no idea, but I'll give you just one example before we move on. The new use of the period, of the full stop. Yeah? I mean, for us, a full stop ends a sentence, right? And we teach them that. But that's not the case for chat on the internet, where most chat rooms these days, the sentences that the kids use do not end in a full stop. There is no sentence final punctuation at all. And a full stop is only used when you want to show something dramatic has happened in the nature of the dialogue. So if you want to be rude and shut the other person up, you'll put a full stop in there at the end of your sentence. Or if you want the dialogue to conclude, then you'll use a full stop. But normally, there's no full stop because the chat is supposed to be going on nice and happily with a lovely dialogue taking place and everybody's in rapport. And the full stop has now got a different value in these circumstances. Now, how on earth do you incorporate that into coursebook material? I don't know. That's your problem. My job is just to try and identify a few things here. So there are some changes that are going to implicate this, and I find these quite fascinating.
Thank you. Agni?
Books have improved so much since my time, and I still think that they're having a really hard time. And this is because technology, which is available to children, is so multisensory, so seductive, in just a way that books, at this point, are not. And kids have not grown up with books like I did. So I believe, and I would recommend, that you teachers first start to use the book as a prop, animate and activate your books. Teach the kids to hold them, smell them, taste them, maybe make their own cover on the book. In my time, a book was sacred. We had to plasticize it, as you remember, and we had to actually keep it as a treasure, untouched, uncreased, never folded up. I believe this is the best way to teach kids not to love books. I don't mean to vandalize them, though if it's artistic vandalism, perhaps it might even facilitate learning. So my recommendation is to teach them to love books as objects, as works of art, to love the color, the feel, the satin, to love the smell of them, the feel of them, and then things will be just a little bit easier, I believe, sometimes.
Thank you. Steve?
The course book and technology. The idea of the course book, we begin with the assumption that there must be a course book. And I think that assumption is no longer valid. If anything I said earlier today was correct, that we need compelling, comprehensible input, it's going to be different for everybody. That's number one. So it's impossible to have preset standards, preset topics, etc. It's going to depend on the class, the teacher, etc. Number two, the idea of a course book for grammar, I think we've made pretty much obsolete. The theory of comprehensible input says if you give people lots and lots of comprehensible input, all the grammar is automatically there. So we have to rethink that. Technology. Oh gosh, I feel like Lily Tomlin, the American comedian who said, "My cynicism is having a hard time keeping up with the times." The object of technology is to make money for technology companies, nothing more, nothing less. That's it, no more. Instead of how do we use this technology, left to us, left to you guys, we would be gradually, slowly bringing in technology as we see right. Thanks to the corporations and companies, we are wholesaling, we're moving huge amounts of technology into classes that is completely untested and unjustified. Thomas Edison did the same thing with electricity. Edison was a terrific businessman, not an ethical capitalist. He was a ruthless capitalist. New inventions were designed to be dependent on electricity so he could make more money. This is what is happening today. So gradually, bit by bit, left to us, we would be slowly and carefully introducing technology as we see fit and gradually experimenting in real life with our students. Instead, untested, unproven technology is being forced on classes only for the profit of private corporations. I'm so glad I can't be fired. This is great.
Thank you. Burcu?
Well, yes, course books now come to us with lots of different lively digital aids, digital resources, and yes, they change the structure and the content of the books. This is one thing. What I'd like to emphasize, point out here is that technology gave the teacher the chance to change the content of the book if she needs so. Because there are millions of resources, free resources on the internet, and the teachers have the chance to share ideas and resources with the other teachers thanks to social networks. And actually this changed the role of the course book, I think. You don't like something, just delete it and find something else on the internet. It is free and it's very easy to find resources. I just wanted to emphasize that, yeah. Teachers can change the content of the books thanks to technology.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Next question. As you see, I give you time. Here you go. Right. Next question. What should trainers train teachers for in the years to come? What is the one biggest challenge effective and dedicated teachers should be ready for? A question asked by Penny Masura. David?
I don't know. I'm just a linguist here, as I said before. I have no idea. I can turn the question round, though, and say what the biggest change, I think, is in the English language situation in the world, which I guess, therefore, is going to be the biggest challenge. And that is the consequence of English having become a global language. 2 billion people speaking it now, and all the new Englishes all around the world, and each new English generating new kinds of, well, vocabulary certainly, grammar to a certain extent, pronunciation definitely, and sometimes even spelling as well. But more than anything else, the different cultural associations that come with these new Englishes, when you look at the different dictionaries of new Englishes that are now out there, you know, Dictionary of South African English, Dictionary of Jamaican English, that sort of thing. And you look at the size of these, you know, 10,000 words, 15,000 words, or idioms or constructions being used in one of these places and not being used in any of the others. And then you end up going to one of these parts of the world and you suddenly realize that the distinction between the native speaker and the non-native speaker has disappeared, because I don't understand what's going on in that language any more than you do. You know, the first time I went to South Africa and encountered South African English for the first time, we're driving along the road and the British Council driver, I see a sign saying, "Robot ahead." I turn to the driver and I say, what's going on? And he looks at me and says, "What's your problem?" And I say, "You know, what's a robot?" He says, "What's a robot? You don't know what a robot is?" I say, "No, what's a robot?" He says, "A robot, it's a traffic light." Robot is the South African word for traffic light. And that means you hear sentences in South African English like, "Turn left at the robot." You know, the shop is 3 robots ahead. The robot is broken, and so on. I just thought they'd landed, that was all. And multiply that now by several thousand lexical items that you need to know if you're going to access South African English. Means accessing South African culture, essentially, because most of these new words are from the other languages of South Africa, as well as loan words from English. And so this is the biggest change that's taking place, because every country in the world is now generating huge quantities of culture-specific vocabulary, which people from outside don't understand. Exactly how you train teachers to do that, I haven't the foggiest idea, but that's definitely one of the biggest challenges, it seems to me.
Thank you. Luke. Hi.
Thank you. Well, what should train teachers for in the years to come? What is the one biggest challenge effective and dedicated teachers should be ready for? I think it can be summed up by the word standardization. We see it in the rise of standardized testing, which Stephen referred to earlier. We see it in not just the arrival, but the prominence in educational discourse and in public discourse about education of words like accountability, words borrowed from business. We see it in the emphasis on efficiency. We see it in the absence of other words that as teachers we're perhaps more familiar with and which we should fight for the right to preserve as part of our professional life. And there are ways that we can resist this, and I know this isn't about methodology, but if we're talking about the one biggest challenge, then I think there needs to be an awareness of the rise of standardization and of the threat that it poses to what we would understand intuitively as teaching, not just the delivery of content to feed standardized testing, but responding to students based on their needs and their lives. Sorry, I finished there. I should have said based on their lives.
Thank you. Burcu.
Yeah, we always say to our parents that it is not a class of 24 students. It is 24 different individuals. They're all unique. And it is really important that teachers design their lessons according to different learning styles, as Marjorie talked about in her session. But it's not always easy. It's a cliche sometimes to say that. Yeah, we differentiate instruction in the classroom. We do different activities for each kind of learning styles, but it's not true. I think we must give teachers practical solutions for that, and for them to be able to really design their lessons according to the individuals' different learning styles. And also, I think being a reflective teacher is very, very important because teaching can be a very solitary profession if we cannot find the ways to develop, to share with other teachers. Showing teachers some ways to meet other people from not only from the teacher's room, this time from all around the world. We have lots of different options. The personal learning network concept maybe, you know, how to find your way in the social networks and build up your PLN. And digital citizenship, digital footprints. We must protect our students. And also we must train, inform, educate our parents as well. Because when we use technology in our classrooms, we ask students, we go beyond, we do our best to go beyond the walls and take English home with different types of activities using technology. But if the parents do not know enough about technology, they either allow their children to do everything anytime or they just ban everything. And it's a barrier for us. We must train our parents as well. Yeah, that's what came to my mind, yeah, in terms of training teachers.
Thank you. Agni?
There's two questions here. I'll try the first one. I believe that teachers in the future will need to be trained to forget that they are teachers. They need to shift their focus from teaching to how kids learn. These are two different things in two different worlds. And I do so believe that we as teachers need to be co-learners. This is a new attitude, and that means actually that as I express and communicate the special learning, then I'm also learning the new people, the new generation. There are new ways. It's a different country for me. It's a very different generation, though we wear even the same clothes, the same brands, and we listen to the same music. But it's a different generation. So I invite us all to forget about teaching and just be co-learners. And then, what is the one biggest challenge effective and dedicated teachers should be ready for? Break our stereotypes about what is a smart student, who is a clever student, what is success in life. If I may, I would ask your permission to talk about Greece, our country. All the advice that we got from our parents gave us a leeway to a good future. The advice we are giving to our kids is not working. We tell them, get diplomas, you know, all this stuff is not working in the new society, our new society. They need so many more subtle and special and precious skills, like becoming entrepreneur, being inventive, taking up initiative. The new generation will remain jobless without those skills. So the future challenge for our Greek teachers, I think, will be to teach our kids to take their lives in their hands.
Thank you. Steve?
I'm going to say what everyone else said, but put it in different terms. Let's talk about the word training. Training means we already know what teachers should do and how they should do it and what they should teach. This comes from the standards people who think they know. We're not interested in training in agreement with the others. We're interested in education, teacher education. I heard a great explanation of this. I think it came from Jim Elatus, died recently. Dr. Elatus, who I thought was a wonderful person, said, if your daughter comes home from school and said she's had sex education, that's okay. But if she says, Dad, I just had sex training, then you wonder what happened, okay? So it's completely different implication. Now, education, staying up to date with things, is made much easier by the internet. I'm in favor of the internet. All scholars and hypochondriacs love the internet, okay? And the internet is good for us in teacher education because it is a ready source of research, especially that coming from Steve Krashen's website and from Twitter, where I'm very active on Twitter, trying to catch up to Justin Bieber. And on Facebook, that's how you can keep up. But the internet is also good so we can grow from each other's examples. The fabulous creativity of our colleagues in teaching is now there on the internet. It's all over the place. And thanks to the internet, and I'm going to quote Luke Medings' description here, we need to be part of a considered revolt against standardization. And the internet is our friend here. It's the underground. I'm going to give you a source so you can find out what's going on in the United States. Very briefly, what is happening under the Obama administration, believe it or not, is worse than what happened under the Bush administration. I know this is hard to believe, but this is actually what happened thanks to the fact that the president appointed his old friend, a basketball player, to become Secretary of Education, who has never spent a day alone in a room with 10-year-old children, okay? Nor has any interest in doing so and knows nothing about educational research at all. Neither does anybody on his staff.
It's always been the case.
It's always been the case in the United States too, but this is the worst because the stakes are higher. The U.S. Department of Education seems to be now, in the words of my colleague, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Gates Foundation and Pearson Publication, okay? I'm sorry, I have to say it, because that's exactly what's going on. This is how we find out. And this is how we can have what Luke has called a considered revolt. Let me give you a website. This, I think, is the best source. SusanOhanian.org. Susan Ohanian is the author of a book called Whatever Happened to Recess? Recess is being eliminated from schools so students can do more test preparation, believe it or not. She is also on Twitter, Susan Oha, and this is the center of gravity of the underground, so you can see where it is going, who the strongest proponents are, and see what the resistance is like.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the time that we could have some questions from the floor.
I'm just ensured I'll never be invited anywhere.
Now, don't tell me I don't know, same way David Chrystal said. Nobody? One, two, three, four, five. Okay, right. I've come prepared and wanting what I see, as the poet says, but tied to fate. So, your next question. Let's change from some of the other. Creativity in the classroom. What is it? Okay, right, Steve?
Well, I hope that the work we've been doing is open the door for teachers and students to use their natural creativity. It's an invitation. And let me just give you one example of many, many, many of what teachers are doing. And you can think of at least 10 the moment I say it. I know this guy. Bryce Hedstrom is his name. He's a high school Spanish teacher in Colorado. He's also a real man's man. He's the coach of the wrestling team, okay? Bryce is very cool. He teaches beginning Spanish, and what we want in beginning Spanish is for the students to get to know each other and be actively involved in the class and to be excited about it. The first day of class in Spanish, beginning Spanish, he asks the students about themselves. How many brothers do you have? How many sisters do you have? What's your name? Do you have any pets? The students are the curriculum. The other students are quizzed on how many pets does Susie have? What does she feed her pets? What does Susie's mom think about her pet hamster? What's going on with Susie and her brother? As a result, everybody's interested. The class is personalized, which is how you guarantee compelling, comprehensible input. After a while, the students all know each other. And you know, high school, secondary school, is the most socially stratified organization in the world, right? You have the athletes who don't talk to the scholars and all that. This breaks down in the class. Once you're not bound by a grammar syllabus and you can say anything as long as it's comprehensible and extremely interesting, we have opened the door for more creativity than we have ever seen, our natural creativity that's already there. Your applause is for my pal Bryce, I'm going to tell him.
Thank you. Burcu?
Well, I think creativity is designing your lessons in a way that will make your students feel that they're doing something they enjoy. They're not learning English. It's like giving them some compelling, comprehensible input. Right? I understood it very well. I listened to it very carefully, yes. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Oh, thank you. Agnes?
What a wonderful question. And for me, creativity is the chance that a kid has in class to be themselves, to be a kid, to use all of their senses. And actually, for me, creativity to teach creativity for us teachers means to lead kids to be 1, solution finders, 2, beauty finders, 3, goodness finders, and period.
Truth and beauty.
Thank you.
Keats.
I'm sorry, sometimes, you know, I just get Luke.
Well, I don't believe that creativity should be seen as a special subject. I don't think we should imagine that creativity is something we do on a Tuesday afternoon, or that certain activities are where we get our creativity into class. So I don't think it should be a special subject. As Agnes said earlier, children are naturally creative. That was a powerful part of your plenary presentation this morning. And I think it's important to bear in mind our own creativity as teachers. So I think there needs to be, I'm using it in I guess, a less technical sense, but a flow of creativity which involves both the teacher and the students. And I think we also sometimes imagine that creativity is creativity with a big C, like Picasso level creativity, where we're making wonderful artifacts. I think it's important to see the act of saying what you want to say in a second language as a creative act. And if we allow people to say what they really want to say and need to say, then creativity will flow.
Thank you. David? I don't know, but that's okay.
I mean, I know what creativity is in linguistic terms, but I don't know what you do with it in the classroom. I mean, for me as a linguist, creativity is the bending and breaking of rules, and the daring to bend and break rules, whatever they are. It's the other big function of language. You know, if you look up the word language in a dictionary and get a definition, it tells you language is a form of intellectual communication or something like that, you know, an ideational view of language. And everybody thinks that's the only function of language, but of course it isn't. And the function of language to enjoy, to entertain, to make jokes, to all those things, language play, ludic linguistics, it's sometimes called. That seems to me a far more important role. You know, George Eliot, the novelist, once said, "A different taste in jokes places a great strain on the affections." In other words, if you're with your partner and you're enjoying each other's jokes and wordplay, then your marriage is safe, really, or your relationship is safe. But the day comes and one partner says to the other, "I wish you'd stop making that silly, jokey noise," or "Why are you still making those silly puns?" Then that relationship hasn't got much longer to live. In other words, language play is there not just for the kind of self-enjoyment of it, or the other enjoyment of it when we tell jokes to each other. It has bigger social relationships than that. And it all comes down in the end to this issue of the bending and breaking of rules, of being original. Whenever I talk to literary people, which I do all the time going around, and I say to them, "What is it that you novelist, you poet, you dramatist, what do you want to do more than anything else in your world? Create a new story, create a new character?" They say, no, I want, all the stories have been told, all the characters are out there really. I just want them to sound different from they've ever sounded before. I want my language to be fresh and original, like nothing has ever happened before. And it's this fear of banality that drives literary people on and on and on. And this is, as Robert Graves said, a poet has got to master the rules of English grammar before he attempts to bend and break them. It's the bending and breaking of rules that's at the heart of all this. Kids do this absolutely naturally from the moment they're born, because as soon as they're born, they hear their parents and other caretakers bending and breaking the rules around them in the form of baby talk. And it goes on and on and on. And then they get to school and suddenly they're told they mustn't bend and break rules anymore. It's just rules all the time. And something, as you were saying this morning, something happens then. Something magical goes out. Language is there for play. Language, in the beginning was the word, well, yes, but in the beginning was word play, I think, more than anything else. So.
Pardon? Okay, just, yeah, there's a question, huh?
To be or not to be, that is the question.
Thank you.
Yeah,
okay, it's on. Hello. All of you have like a really great career, and you've done things in your field. I would like to ask, if you were starting again now, having had all the experience you've had, what would you tell yourself? Like, what advice, what would you tell yourself, seeing how education or linguistics are now, what would you tell yourself if you could start again, or what advice would you give yourself?
Burcu?
Wow. I think for some time, I don't know.
The question is, you know, up for grabs. Who would like to answer it? Agni.
Okay.
Thank you.
This is a lovely personal question, and I welcome it. I think I would do many things differently, and the advice I would start with, I would tell myself, come on girl, tame your fears. And to some extent, those fears have pushed me on, and I have achieved, but they have robbed me from, on occasion, from very special satisfactions, joys, the magic of letting go, living in the moment, and opening my heart to what is possible. So if I may just give you myself one advice, it would be just let go of the fears. Just be open to a benevolent universe. There's far too much gossip about the world being a bad place, and it isn't, and we know already. It's time we just stop that. Thank you.
Luke?
Well, I think Agnes has said what I imagined I might say with more eloquence. Because in a way, the first thing that came to my mind was I'd do the same things, but enjoy doing them more.
Yes, exactly.
And one
That's
of
my point.
yeah, and one of
Exactly
the
my point.
and one of the things that I think I've done, which has led me to this interesting place right here, is to ask questions and to try and do things differently, and in fact to break rules. And I remember finding out at some point from a friend who worked at one of the leading exam boards in the UK that works internationally, that I had been blacklisted from working as an examiner for them, and I wasn't allowed to work as an examiner on their international language exams. And I asked why, and he said it was because you were at a workshop for examiners and you asked difficult questions. So in a way I'm quite proud of that, because although it meant that I didn't get any examining work for the next few summers, it did lead by degrees to interesting events and experiences like today. So I would do the same things, but I'd enjoy it more.
Yeah. Thank you.
Are you ready?
Well, actually, I would worry less. I think it's a different way of, a different way of saying the same thing. Yeah, because at the beginning of my career, I was insecure about being a non-native teacher, for example. I started working at a language school, and they gave me an upper intermediate class. And I was really worried, and it took me so long to adapt to this situation. Yeah, I would worry less at the time I was given that class, because I did it, and I liked my students, and my students liked me. There was nothing to worry about.
Thank you. David?
Well, I would spend quite a lot of time in a classroom doing some teaching, so that one day, when asked to be on a panel, I would be able to say, I do know. And I'd be able to say, I do know the answer to some of these questions.
Steve?
I'll have to alter the question a little and go back on things I regret and things I don't regret. I don't have any sins of commission things I've done that I've regretted, no. It was explained to me by spiritual teacher Ram Dass, what a guy, who said that on the other side, you are not responsible for the consequences of your actions. You're only responsible for your intentions when you did them. So if you thought you were doing the right thing, I just solved 20% of your problems. Isn't that true? Things you felt guilty about, don't worry. If you had no idea how it was going to turn out, you thought you were doing the right thing, that's it. You're okay. Okay? That was Ram Dass's thing. So I don't have any trouble with that. I do have sins of omission. I think I would do the same thing, but do it a lot harder than I did. I think I would write more letters to the editor. I should be in the Guinness Book of World Records for letters written, not letters published, but letters written. I know I'm near the top on that, but I wish I had done more, and I'm doing my best to do more. I think there were more issues I should have attacked that I didn't attack. But so far, no regrets. I would do it all over again.
Thank you. Is there another question?
Well, what we heard was also fabulous, but I'd like to ask Dr. Krashen, compelling material indeed, within a stifling framework, you're 25 years, you're starting, and you have to play by the rules of the game, otherwise you're out. You have to make the difference, and if you write letters to the whatever ministry, you're simply not going to see them published. What I mean to say is we talked about creativity, and I think creativity comes from the teacher, and depending on his traits and his talents. And then we talk about compelling material. I'm very much into compelling material. But we all are fighting with the routine of everyday life and this framework. So how do we fight that?
Thanks for asking the
Dr.
question.
Krashen.
It's very fair and it's the right question to ask. Contrary to popular opinion, I'm not crazy. I do know that it's very hard for people in the class to go out and be revolutionaries, which is why in the United States, the resistance against the standards is being done by old people. People at my age. Ohanian is only a few years younger. Alfie Kohn is getting there. Our leader right now, Diane Ravitch, is 77, okay? None of us can be fired. And let me continue. We're taking advantage of this. Now, as for the classroom teacher, I think what you can do, first of all, the reality of it, I don't want you to get fired. I'm going to give you a political plan, a plan of action, where you will not be fired. It will not cost you any money. You're not at risk, and it takes very little time. Fair enough? Okay. First of all, in classes, do a little more of what's right and a little less of what's wrong, as you can get away with it. I'm quoting Frank Smith. That's his advice. What I'd also suggest is this: how to contribute to the change. 2 steps. Begins with reading and then writing. Reading 5 minutes a day. That's all. Use the internet. Go to susanohanian.org, get on her mailing list, and see what's going on in the United States. Then you'll see what's happening, and you'll see what the resistance is like, and you'll see what other people are saying. If you want to see what's happening in the UK, follow Michael Rosen. See what he's doing. He's a regular contributor to The Guardian. He's absolutely fearless. He's saying things that you are not allowed to say. So read this stuff. Read a few minutes a day. Then share what you read with your friends on the internet. You can't get in trouble. If this is all you do, we will win. The problem is the general public has no idea what's going on, because the general public can only see what the media is saying, and the media is not telling people what's going on, largely through ignorance. The media simply are people, right, in the education area who don't know anything about education. The politicians don't know because they're fed information by their staff who tells them what they think they want to hear. So it's up to us on the internet. This will help spread the information. Soon the whole world will know. If you'd like extra credit, you don't have to do any of this. You see an article in the newspaper, make a comment on the internet. There's a place for comments. You don't have to use your own name. One of my favorite writers in the United States goes under a pseudonym, Chem Teacher. I finally found out who she is. She's a high school chemistry teacher. She always comments. Her comments are absolutely brilliant. She gets it. Hundreds of people are reading these things, maybe thousands. Vote. Vote by liking something someone said, stating your opinion, or simply liking is enough. If we do this, the world will change. We'll inform the public. No risk.
Would you like to say something? Yes, please.
First of all, thank you so much for your very talented, very artistic, and yes, absolutely marvelous presentation before, and I enjoyed it very much. And I understand the framework that you talk about very well. I have 2 pieces of advice. One is take care of yourself and love yourself. It's the best that you can do within that framework, and it's very important. And the second one is if you do just a little bit of guerrilla work, meaning those 5 minutes in the day, and we saw your work, those 5 minutes in the day, within that framework, it just sparkles so intensely that some kids will have different lives because of that and because of you specifically.
Anybody else from the panel would like to answer, or could I ask the last question? Huh? Okay. Pardon? No, we cannot. Thank you. I have... Okay, good. Let's go.
My question is, how can we teach our students to motivate themselves?
That's a good question.
Okay. I'll tell you. We're going? You want to? Good. Go.
I think our students are born with motivation to learn, with curiosity, and we kill it, unfortunately, with rewards sometimes. Maybe in order not to kill this curiosity and motivation, we can do something to improve their inner motivation by not giving so many rewards to them.
Thank you. David?
Very good point.
Oh, come on. I have no idea. Yeah.
Try.
Well, yeah. What I notice is, you know, I've spent quite a lot of time studying what happens in the first year of life with children in language acquisition, and the contrast between what goes on in that year and what happens a few years later when they get to school is so dramatic, so miles apart. That first year, remember, 80% of the language used to kids in the first year is playful language by parents and caretakers and others. It's not intellectual language of the kind they start learning in the second year, and of course which becomes the dominant thing in school. And when I used to study readers a few years ago, you know, early reading schemes and things like that, the thing that struck me most was the complete absence of language play and the creativity and all the other things that have been motivating the kids over the previous few years, but suddenly have disappeared from the reading materials that are there. This is changing now, slowly. But I mean, you know, the kind of thing there used to be, you open the book and there is a picture of a cow and there's some little black stuff at the bottom. The teacher's very interested in this black stuff at the bottom for some reason, but you're interested in the cow. And the teacher says, no, you read the black stuff, it's really interesting. And you read the black stuff and it says, this is a cow. To which the answer is, well, I knew that already. I saw the picture. These days there's been a change. I mean, that's unmotivating. That's the killer kind of a scenario. Now these days, of course, as you well know, some of the reading materials are a jolly sight better than that. These days you get a picture, for example, of a wall and two ears behind the wall. And the bottom, the black stuff says, what's behind the wall? Is it a cow? You turn over. You now see a little bit more of the animal. It's not a cow. Is it a horse? You now turn over and you see a little bit more of the animal, and so on until you get to the end of the book and it turns out to be a pig or something, or Michael Rosen, or anybody, really. Now, you know, this is a good example of the change of attitude that produces that kind of motivation, that continues the motivation to play and to create and to encounter the unexpected, to go back to curiosity and all of these issues. Putting them into our materials is the absolutely critical thing, it seems to me.
Thank you. Luke?
Well, I find myself noting down all sorts of things that my colleagues here have already said, and I find myself returning to Agnes' phrase of something happens, and I thought I might share some of my own experience as a parent with you, because it seems to me quite clear, not just that something happens, but in certain respects, what happens when a sort of holistic approach to nursery years education becomes what is essentially already a testing and objectives-based approach to early years education. And this happens in the UK between the age of around 5 and 6. Years 4 and 5 in nursery and preschool, children are, there's still the sort of echo of holistic and child-centered education. For example, in the way that the room is arranged, in the way that there are corners where people can go and do things that they want to do, whether it's look at books or draw. The students and the parents, actually, the pupils, are told at the start of year 1, which is around age 5 or 6, I think, I'm not very good with numbers, in the UK, that it's going to be very different next term, and the kids are going to have to sit at tables, and they're going to be sitting at the same place. And this is part of what happens. What also happens in homes where children are lucky enough to be read stories, early years stories, which we don't think of as early years, we just think of it as the stories we read as parents, are loads of fun. There are crazy stories, there are hugely imaginative and sometimes a little scary stories, because this is the substance of storytelling and of fairy tales and of imagination. And as soon as children get to school, they come home with readers. And these readers are full of tasks, and they're full of helpful questions for the parent, which will kill any content which has got through the system, which is remotely interesting, which is quite unlikely. But I'm thinking of books like the series we get in the UK and English-speaking countries of Biff and Chip. I think they're published in Australia. They're some of the most awful stories ever written, because they're not stories. They're just descriptions of people going around doing everyday things. Now, if the students themselves were generating these stories, that might be compelling and interesting. But in these stories, they're simply not. This is also part of what happens, and the parents are inveigled into this process by being asked to themselves ask comprehension questions. And so instead of the book being this artifact, which is held and shared between the parent and child, which has texture, which has smell, which might possibly have taste, then it becomes a pedagogic tool. And it's part of what happens in those early years. And so I think I've forgotten the question now, but I hope I've answered it, in part at least, from my own perspective. Oh no, one more thing, I'm so sorry. But it was very clear to me again, the messages we give young learners are very important. So at my daughter's school, there was a motivational sign hanging above the students in, I think, year 1, so they're 5, 6 years old. And the motivational sign was, remember your phonics. I don't need to say any more.
Agni?
I will say that I got a lot of information on this question from Dr. Krashen's talk today, and I'm thankful.
Have I told you how much I like it? Yes.
And if I were to add one thing, it's tackle the parent. The parent tries to motivate the kid, therefore demotivating it. And the more the parent motivates the kid, the more demotivated the kid becomes. And that's the truth, and we Greek teachers know all about this. So one thing is tackle the parent, and that's a very tough task. But actually, as much as we can, lead them into understanding success in life and achievement in more ways than one, which is what grade is he gonna get? So that's one thing. And the next thing is, I find that kids respond to passion, adults respond to passion, old people respond to passion, and so do cats, dogs, and trees. Finding the passion in ourselves as teachers, projecting it, being teachers of flame for the job that we do, for the souls that we meet every day, is the world for a kid's motivation. Maybe we don't see it today. I've had good teachers in my life, and I owe it to them to be here today. So I give them tribute for their passion that came down to me in some way or other. in between that framework that you discussed before, which actually made me hate everything else about school.
Thank you. Steve.
To increase motivation, instead of investing in tests and technology, let's invest in libraries. Access to books.
Yes.
The research on this is incredible. Access to libraries, you take children who are high poverty, you give them access to books, the improvement is remarkable. This is what they lack. Technology is not going to save us. People in the States are now saying we don't need libraries because we have electronic this, electronic that, and with pride they say we now have bookless libraries. It's not going to work. First of all, the technology is too expensive. Electronic books someday are going to be great. Kindles, wonderful. Right now they are far too expensive. When the price of a Kindle comes down to, instead of 80, 90 euros, down to 1 or 2, when the price of an electronic book is no longer 12 euros but becomes a half, then it's going to mean something. Right now it's books, books, and more books.
Well, fellow TESOL Greece members, let me sum up, as I've been told that we need to finish. Non-linear linguist, easy job. Change in mindset. Animate, activate books. Teach children to hold books, to love them as works of art. Technology untested and unjustified. I don't know. Standardization. Fight for the right to preserve. They're all unique. Being a reflective teacher, be trained to forget we're teachers, we're co-learners. Comprehensible input, excuse me, try to make children in class to be themselves, flow of creativity, the bending and breaking of rules, tame your fears, sins of omission, do a little more of what's right and a little less of what's wrong, love yourself. Something happens. Let's invest in libraries and let's get books. TESOL Greece, you've reached new heights this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Very well done. Thank you.
Before we go, Madam Chair, La Reina, now we are going to the...
That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
So, I thank all of you on behalf of the board of TESOL Greece for this fantastic panel, for this fantastic answers, for this fantastic day. Thank all of you who are still here, and I do want to remind you that those of you who still have the courage, go to public 5th floor where we have our convention party, okay? And see you all tomorrow, 10 o'clock in the morning.
Actually, excuse me, not those of you who have the courage. Get up and go to the party. See you there. All this positivity and all these things. Thank you very much. Thank you. You were fantastic.
Steve, I have a message.